The Boston Bruins were the NHL's best team all season, but can they translate that into a long playoff run and a Stanley Cup? Ian McLaren of Locked On Bruins is here to discuss that and all things Boston Bruins. Gil Martin here, and the Locked On Road to the Stanley Cup continues as we welcome Ian McLaren from Locked On Boston Bruins to take stock of the Bruins' chances to make a deep postseason run. And Ian, what are the biggest storylines for the Bruins heading into the playoffs this year?
I mean, I guess the biggest one would probably be the old President's Trophy curse and whether or not they can overcome that. They have been the best team in the NHL this season pretty much right from day one. They are relatively healthy at the moment. And yeah, that'll be the biggest question. It's usually the field that wins over the number one seed coming into the playoffs. But Boston has just been so much better than everybody else this season. It's difficult at this point before the puck drops on the postseason to think that they will falter. But I mean, it's always a possibility. You never know what can happen in the NHL playoffs, especially. And that's the biggest storyline, the biggest question coming in is whether they can take that regular season success and carry it over into the playoffs when the games matter most.
Should be a very interesting situation there. And I mean, I'm sure there are many, but what do you feel is the biggest reason your team will win the Stanley Cup?
I mean, yeah, there's a ton of reasons why, but I've been saying it a lot on Locked On Boston Bruins over the last several weeks that to doubt these Bruins right now is to doubt the leadership group that they have in place. And I think that, there's a reason why Patrice Bergeron returned to the Bruins this season. There's a reason why David Krejci came back from Czechia to play again in Boston. And that is to win a Stanley Cup. They won it 12 years ago. They've lost in the finals twice since then. And that is the number one goal for this team this season. And the leadership group in Boston is as strong, if not stronger, than any around the NHL. And we saw that on full display, even at the Winter Classic. Nick Foligno with the famous intermission speech urging guys not to miss out on this opportunity, to take hold of it. And that was just an outdoor game. I think that is going to carry over into the playoffs. And there's just a real connectivity in the locker room. Everybody's on the same page. It's a very tight-knit group. And everybody's going to leave it out on the ice and learn from that experience in 2019. Learn from Nick Foligno, per se. Learning from watching his Columbus Blue Jackets upset the Tampa Bay Lightning in 2019. All those collective experiences, I think, will come together and push this team to the top.
And how about the biggest reason why your team will not win the Stanley Cup?
I mean, there's always the possibility of injury. There's always the possibility of running into a hot goaltender. Again, anything can happen in a 7-game series. I think that's the biggest thing is the Bruins either running into bad luck, beating themselves, getting goalied. I guess the biggest question mark would be maybe a lack of experience in net between Linus Ullmark and Jeremy Swayman in the postseason. And seeing we just saw Linus Ullmark, the .938 save percentage through the regular season, tying with Tim Thomas back in 2011. We all know what he did in that playoff run. There's always the danger that those numbers could revert back to kind of career averages. And that lack of real big game experience in net could be problematic, but I mean, you don't get that experience without going through it. And they had a tough test last year against the Carolina Hurricanes. Hopefully they're up to the task here in 2023.
I know there's a lot of choices, but who is the key player to watch on the Bruins this playoff year?
Yeah, that's a really good one. I think going back to David Krejci, I think he's going to be key for this Bruins team. He missed the last handful of games in the regular season due to injury, but looking back at 2013, if the Bruins had won against the Chicago Blackhawks that year, he would have been the Conn Smythe Trophy winner. He stepped up huge in 2019. He's playoff Krejci for a reason. He always seems to step up in big games, and they've had this success this season. He's almost kind of been not an afterthought, but again, underappreciated. That's been the story of his career in Boston. And I think he is going to be a huge presence for this team. And again, he went home last year, played in front of his family and friends. He came back for this exact purpose, and I don't think he's going to let this opportunity go lightly for sure.
What would a successful playoff run look like for the Bruins? I would assume it's Stanley Cup or bust. And then what's at stake if they fall short?
Yeah, Stanley Cup is the goal, and anything short of that, honestly, will be a disappointment. And that's a different story than even at the beginning of this season. A lot of people were saying perhaps they might not even make the playoffs, or maybe improving on last year. But as it stands right now, with the regular season they put together, anything short of a Stanley Cup, even advancing to the final and losing, massive disappointment. What it means if they don't win, well, this is probably the last kick at the cup that these guys are going to put together. You don't get these opportunities very often. They just did it 4 years ago, but Patrice Bergeron, David Krejci specifically, this could very well be it for them, regardless of the outcome in the playoffs. Salary cap restrictions will make it very difficult to build this kind of roster, especially with David Pasternak's new contract extension kicking in next year. He and McAvoy alone will be making almost 25% against the cap. So yeah, basically the final chapter of their legacies, this core's legacy, is at stake here. It won't necessarily diminish anything if they don't win. There's still surefire Hall of Famers. Numbers will be retired. But watching those guys potentially finish it out without getting another cup would be devastating to them personally, and devastating to the fans and the organization, surely.
No question about that. Ian, thank you so much. That does it for our Boston Bruins preview here on the Locked On Road to the Stanley Cup. Be sure to subscribe or follow Locked On Boston Bruins for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. The Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.